My name is Kathleen Receiver, if you're just joining us, and I am a digital innovation leader with the IT3 innovation team, and I work with the Zone 2 Crew Elementary schools. So we are glad that you are here today. Make sure that if you have questions, you can ask them in the chat. Elaine and Matt are there to answer your questions, and I know that Annie, you and Laura may have some colleagues as well that'll be in the chat for you.
Yes, ma'am. We will have some folks helping out with questions.
Okay, great. Well, we are ready and excited to learn from you when you are.
Great. Happy to be here. Let me get my slide up and going here. Give me just a second.
You are fine. And while we're waiting for her to get everything loaded up there, like I said before, make sure if you introduce yourself and tell us what school you're from in the chat. We love seeing the different schools and teachers that are joining us throughout the district, as well as the district office folks. And we can see your screen, Anne, so you can.
You can?
Yep.
Okay.
So you can hop over to your presentation slide. Yep. You got. You're
you
good.
Can see my slideshow, correct?
Yep, I can see it. Okay. So you can go to, or not share, but go to present. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You got it.
Sorry about that.
No,
you're learning all this. I'm going to make
we
sure
are all learning. Yes, make sure you turn that on, and the extra large is the best to see. So if you click on that arrow next to captions and text size. Mm-hmm. And then go to, yep, you got it. And then click.
Okay.
Click on it. Ready. You probably have to click on, you're fine. You probably have to click on closed captions again. Just actually click on the square. Yep. There you go.
There we go.
Okay.
Let's. All right. Here we go. Okay. So this is going to be somewhat of a review. I know we've been on the last several weeks, and we still continue to get some questions pertaining a lot to, data collection, progress monitoring, various strategies to use. So we're gonna review some of that with you guys today. So some of it may look a little familiar, but we've made some adjustments along the way as well. So just a reminder that the parent communication piece is going to be really important with our ECE kids, making sure that we're having regular communication with parents and students, just really even beyond the instructional piece of working with our students, making sure that we're communicating with parents with regards to the needs of the student, how they're doing with the instructional piece of things, but also just behaviorally, are there things that we can help parents with? I would imagine along the way we've worked out some kinks with regards to what that instructional piece looks like, but just keeping in mind, the needs of the student and, the access to technology and things of that nature. Continuously kind of checking in with the parents on what is going well, what the student may need support with, and what are they able to take on as the parent. Okay. And then looking at just not taking for granted that parents know sort of how to, instruct their child or work with them. So we may need to have parent coaching sessions, giving parents a task analysis, so breaking down the steps to certain activities, things that we sort of naturally do as teachers, but that, parents may not be as accustomed to. So also it may be previewing work, providing answer keys, things of that nature. But we do want to just make sure that we're checking in with our parents on a consistent basis. I kind of talked last week about having a scheduled time days and times that you check in with your parents. Some parents we know may need daily check-ins. Others may just need a couple times a week or even once a week works better for them. Again, it's about what's works for the family. And then, of course, I have still continued to link resources for families at the bottom. I encourage teachers to check those out, though, because they do a good job of task analyzing things like providing choice for your child, using positive reinforcement with your child. What does that look like? Okay. SDI examples. So we've talked a lot about making sure that we are providing, continuing to provide that specially designed instruction to our ECE students. That is, that is really a huge part. That's, the IEP goals are set up with that specially designed instruction because that's what the student needs in addition to a typical student. So some examples and things to think about. That SDI may need to look a little different during this time. So, for example, direct instruction in the use of a break card. If the student is using a break card at school, we need to think about what that will look like in the home. And these are all things we discuss in that communication with parents. But we may want to, have the child create that card at home. You could have a card that you've created for the student that looks the same as the one they use at school that you may be able to email to the parent if they have access to printing that off. Or maybe it's just easier. The parent says, I don't know that we need a card at home. Can we just use a verbal cue when the student needs a break? A verbal cue that either the parent prompts them with and or the student uses with the parent or both when potentially a break is needed. Deciding where is that break taken in the home, discussing those home scenarios for when a break may be needed. And during our instructional piece, we might be role playing that with the student, or walking through a scenario. Tell me about a time when you get frustrated at home that you might need to take a break. Really task analyze taking that break. So starting with, what does my body feel like when I need to take a break? And then what are the steps to doing that? I use my cue. I go to my break area. Are there other materials in that break area, such as fidgets or stuffed animals, things like that are calming for the student? So working through, and breaking it down into steps and creating a visual of those steps. And then possibly emailing that to the parent or maybe taking a picture and texting it is an option. Okay. Direct instruction in the use of a calm down corner, just another example. We've got to think a little bit outside the box. It's not going to necessarily look the same as the calm down corner at home, but we want to recreate it, as best we can in that home setting. Identifying that location in the home, visual supports for that area, trying to set it up similar to school, but again, it may need to look a little bit different. Identifying items in the home. Maybe they have a fidget box at school in their calm down area. What sort of items do they have at home that could replace the ones that were being utilized at school? And then again, providing that instruction or role playing the use of that area. Okay. Some other SDI examples, instruction. A lot of our kiddos who have behavioral goals also have that instruction in social skills embedded as a specially designed instruction. We want to make sure we're continuing to provide those social skills lessons daily to address the areas of need. Kids are going to look different depending on their needs. So, for some kiddos, it might be coping, calming strategies, problem-solving scenarios, how to appropriately follow directions, how to self-monitor. It really depends on some of those other SDIs that are also in the IEP, but making sure that our lessons apply to the needs of the student. And then thinking also about how we communicate that to the parent, because when we provide a lesson to the student, ideally at school, we would be using positive reinforcement when they're demonstrating those skills. We may be using a ticket system to encourage or tokens, or just as simple as positive praise to encourage the use of that skill. We have to communicate with parents what we're instructing the students on, so that then they're able to maybe follow through with that positive reinforcement for using those skills appropriately. And then, of course, consider that access to technology when planning those social skills lessons. We may even need to be doing social skills lessons just via phone with a student. So it really depends on the access to technology and needs of the student. So direct instruction and role playing and modeling. We want to role play scenarios through the teleconference. That might be an option if we're able to virtually teach them. Assigning students to create videos. Laura spoke about that a couple weeks ago, and had some good information about, creating videos and or using pre-made videos that we can find, modeling appropriate skills. So we always want to make sure that the student is modeling the appropriate skill. Direct instruction and self-monitoring. I'll show you some example sheets on that, but again, we want to make sure we're teaching them. If this isn't something they were doing on a consistent basis at school, or still needed a lot of guidance with that, we will need to continue to provide that instruction, not just hand a form and say, hey, monitor yourself. So, that may, if that's something new, that may require more frequent check-ins initially to get the student in the routine of self-monitoring. Okay, so making sure, with progress monitoring, if we're doing virtual lessons, we can observe the behaviors and actually document on our monitoring forms. If we're unable to collect data virtually, or if we need more data than just maybe it's a behavior that we're not necessarily even going to see in a virtual lesson, or parent is able to see it, differently outside of the virtual lessons. There are various forms that we can provide the parent to help us with that data collection piece. But we do want to make sure we're continuing to collect data on as best we can on all of those goals. And we talked a little bit last week about it may have to look a little different. We want to make sure we're documenting if that data collection looks a little different than it would in the classroom. And making sure that we continue to work with parents and students on rewards, incentives. And we want to continue to make sure that we're graphing the data based on the IEP goals. So our behavior goals typically have at least twice weekly data points. We need to continue to graph twice weekly data points and indicate on that graph, in some form or fashion, we need to indicate on that graph where NTI data collection began, so that it's very clear, the data that was collected during NTI. So just some sample point sheets. Again, if you access this PowerPoint after our session today, you can click on the links at the bottom. Feel free to copy it into your Google and make adjustments to it. But just want to provide some examples of what point sheets we might share with families, and you may need to adjust it where parent is only, keeping track of data during one period of time in the day. So it may not be an all day long thing. The one on the left there has morning, afternoon, evening. The other one is just set up as a daily, but we may say just track data when they're doing their schoolwork, or just track data, at the dinner table. So again, that's working with the parent, and if it's an adjustment to what would be typical with the school day, we'll document that. Some self-monitoring samples are here. So, Again, instruction would need to happen here. Any of these forms I can adapt and take data during virtual lessons or ask the parent to take data and or the student. The one on the right there allows for the student and the parent or teacher. So I could use it during virtual lessons with the student, or I could ask the student and parent to utilize this form so that we get sort of a good, self-monitoring, but sometimes the student may think differently about what they earned than what the parent or as the teacher we might think that they earned. So that brings up good discussion with the student on, I notice here you think you used kind words at a 3. Your parent indicates kind words were a 1. Let's talk about why your parent may have indicated a 1 instead of a 3. So it brings up good teachable moments and discussion and reflection on behavior. Sample check-in, check-out form. This is on Intervention Central. Again, it can be completely, adapted to the needs of the student. And then just some sample reward menus as well. Again, we want to work to establish a reward system with the parent that's appropriate for the home setting. And then lastly, the data collection piece. How do I collect data? We want to make sure, I talked a little bit about this already, about collecting it during virtual sessions, working with the parent if we need to collect beyond the virtual sessions and adapt for that. But we also want to just make sure that we're documenting any adjustments to that. You can utilize this form that's linked, or there's a couple of other forms linked on here in the blue that you'll see. All of them are sort of similar in what you're documenting. This would be your documentation of SDI. But you also want to make sure that you're continuing to graph the data that you are getting either through those virtual lessons or through this help with and partnership with the parent for the actual graphing twice weekly of the data. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Laura and let her talk a little bit about behavior strategies.
Okay. Good morning. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth with strategies that Anne just kind of talked about, but wanted to end with a few of these strategies. And again, this is review since Anne and I have been doing this training for a couple of weeks, but wanted to talk about really looking at those strategies and how we can implement them in our Google Meetups, our classrooms, and also when parents are working with students. But one of the things Anne touched on was just thinking about how we can look at and reinforce students and really think about that within the classroom. Because a lot of our students, as we provide work, provide what is needed and tasks to students, when we look at that in the classroom, these things are really broken down, and parents and individuals who are helping these students in the home might not realize that. So thinking about those reinforcement strategies and how we can kind of look at that in this new virtual learning, as well as if they have tasks at home, how we're breaking those down if they're paper tasks, and thinking about how we can use this during NTI. And within that, we see that we really need to think about praise, those first then and choice boards and token systems. And let's take a little bit more in-depth look at those. So with our praise, oftentimes when we see, when we work with our students, we understand how important praise is and how it motivates our students to engage in their activities and routines. So when we're thinking about our virtual classrooms and with parents, it may be just a reminder and a good model to show them what that praise may look like. And so when you're working with your students, some ways you can kind of work praise into your virtual classroom or modeling for those parents and talking with parents is model and use that behavior specific praise and make sure it matches the demands. We know as classroom teachers that when stuff is more difficult, we need to praise more often and be more specific. So thinking about that within your classroom, you may want to, as you're virtually teaching, set a timer on your phone to vibrate to remind you, because a lot of times we're trying to get through these lessons. We want to make them quick. But we know that we have students who are reliant or need that praise and motivation to continue upon their routines and tasks. So thinking about, can I set my phone to vibrate beside me? And when I hear that, I need to look at my students or give them time for praise and really give that behavior specific praise. Like, I love the way you're engaged with this instruction. Working on praising after those assignments and as we break them down, and making sure we start with praise and also end with it. We want to make sure that as this virtual teaching is a new realm for our students, that we're making sure they start with something good and end with something good. So as they come back tomorrow, they'll be more motivated to engage with their activities and instruction. The other thing, and Anne talked about really looking at motivation and, working with visuals, but think about that first then within your classroom and how you can work with that with families, but making sure that they understand that I know you want to get to your video game, or I know you want to get to outside, but we first got to complete this, and making sure they understand that language. So some of our students may not need the true visual, but thinking about that language we're talking with them in classrooms. If we're virtually working with them, first we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. As soon as we get this done, we can go and take a small break. But thinking about what can motivate those students to complete those tasks, and also starting off with having them choose a reinforcer. Guys, we're all going to work for this. Choose your own reinforcer at home, what we can work for. Providing parents with choice boards, which we'll look at in a minute, that they can select to get through virtual activities. And cueing the students throughout. Remember that we're working towards your then. So first we got to do this. So if you're doing that virtual instruction or working with those families, modeling for them what that looks like. We're still on task. We're almost to this reinforcer. And so that parents can understand what that looks like. So we're constantly not always redirecting students, but using that positive and first then language to motivate them. So I touched on this before, but those choice boards can be something that we use for families too, and a good motivation. Sometimes we think, well, I can't get the student to work for anything, but showing parents what that may look like. And this could be as simple as written words on a piece of paper, and they circle which one they want to work for. Or it could be, if you have those pictures provided, you can use something to really motivate them, and they select that picture. But you want to make sure that you're using those reinforcers that are effective for students. And if they have them in front of them, you might virtually say, hey, everyone, pick your choice. We're going to work for this in the classroom. And then they can select it, and they're working towards it. So you're giving those reminders throughout. We're almost to our choices. We're almost there. We're almost to these breaks. And making sure that it's used in conjunction with that first then language that we used in the past. We're here now, but we're almost to there. So first we're going to do this, then we're going to contact reinforcement. And Anne touched on this a little bit, thinking about those things that we use in the classroom and those token boards. So we may have students that have those, and ours may be a little bit more fancy than what they have, unless we've provided those to families. But they can be drawn on a dry erase board. They can be drawn on a piece of paper. But really, we want to think about with families and with support systems that are working with these students, that we talk about, when we first introduce them, they need to get these tokens on a thin schedule. They get them quickly and understand what they're working towards. If we make them complete 5 to 10 problems before they contact a token, our students may be like, this isn't worth it and this isn't reinforcing. So making sure that we give those tokens pretty quickly at first, and then they work towards them and understand these tokens are valuable. They're getting me towards the end of my assignment, or towards my reinforcer. And making sure, again, as I've said in the past with that first then and choice board, reminding it through your virtual instruction, modeling it for the parents, talking this through with the parents if they're having trouble with their students, and they have a lot of behavior issues that may be arising during instruction. And making sure you praise the students as you give them the token. Hey, everybody, give yourself a check or give yourself a token. You're working so excellent. So they know that because they're on task, that they're contacting those tokens with their assignments.
Hey, Laura, can I also add something? Again, like I said before, I have a child who has special needs, and with him, this works. Those tokens and this system work for me at home as a parent as well. And I've learned this through other teachers and counselors telling me these strategies. But not all parents know these things, especially when they're not in education. They just don't realize it. It doesn't come to them, as naturally as it may for you or myself. So this is just great information for all parents, and I think even my husband would benefit from watching this.
Exactly. Yes. Great point. Yes. That's why I think when we have that mindset of a teacher and parent, we may think it's something so simple, but modeling and teaching parents and making sure that they understand how valuable these strategies are. So I completely agree.
Yes. And also grandparents or aunts or uncles or anyone that may be caring for the children, they really need to understand these as well, because again, they may not be educators and it doesn't come to them as naturally. And so we've had to also teach, our parents, their grandparents, these strategies.
Exactly. Whatever their support system, you're exactly correct. And so the last thing I want to touch on, and Anne touched on it a little bit, and I had talked about this in weeks past, but one of our really good strategies that we use is video modeling. And that's where we can videotape a scenario or a desired behavior that we want the student to engage in. And we can show that to them to remind them exactly what it looks like. If we do a lot of talking, as we know with our students, and we may have students that just learn better visually, we may want to show them exactly what sitting and what, completing this task may look like. So there are different types and formats, and I've covered these before, but I wanted to really cover them again because I think it's such a great tool to use. But there's video self-modeling, and that would be where a teacher or parent video the student engaging in the behavior. So it doesn't have to be 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be great quality, but say you can model for the parent, hey, if you see him working on his task, take a short little snippet of him working on his task. And then the next time you want him to engage in it, go, okay, we're going to start working on math. And this is what it looked like. And it may be a short 5-second little video or whatever the desired behavior is. So they understand when we talk to them, we may assume that they know, hey, what does on task look like? But we're truly videoing it and showing them what it looks like. The other type and format that we could use is that video peer modeling. So this is where a teacher or a parent may video themselves engaging in the desired behavior, or we may do a peer or a sibling for that matter, since we're in the home. And what we do is view modeling. So for example, if you're having a student
Are you there, Laura?
Yes.
Okay. For some reason, it cut out for a second, like that last sentence you said.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll start again. So the point of view would be where you hold up the phone and you show the point of view of completing that assignment. So if you're sending, for example, the student to complete a task where they match certain things, you show a video of them matching it from their point of view. And so that can really be a powerful tool to show them this is exactly what matching looks like. So these are all great little tools to kind of say, I want to show you the desired behavior. One thing I want to say is that with video modeling, sometimes people will say, well, should I video the inappropriate behavior? But with video modeling, it's a positive thing. So we will always want to video the behaviors we want to see. So this may be a great tool to kind of remind families and to teach families, again, because they might say, I just can't get him to do this. And so we may assume that, hey, a video may not work, but it's a great tool for families.